But then other family members, chances were, would have a sick member of the family. And so times were a lot different back then. We didn't have the welfare systems that we have today. And so people didn't have someone to help them back then. So in 1853, what they did was a minister by the name of Charles Loring Brace got involved. He teamed up with several other business people, and they built orphanages all over New York City. With these orphanages, they had a superintendent and a matron. The superintendent and matron would take care of 150 kids at a time. Now, there's probably about that many people in here, I would say. And can you imagine if John, what if you and I would take care of all those kids? Can you imagine if we could do that? I don't think we could either. Well, that's what they did, day after day after day. And those kids would be in age from newborn babies clear up to age 18. Other family members, chances were, would have a sick member of the family. And so times were a lot different back then. We didn't have the welfare systems that we have today. And so people didn't have someone to help them back then. So in 1853, what they did was a minister by the name of Charles Loring Brace got involved. He teamed up with several other business people, and they built orphanages all over New York City. With these orphanages, they had a superintendent and a matron. The superintendent and matron would take care of 150 kids at a time. Now, there's probably about that many people in here, I would say. And can you imagine if John, what if you and I would take care of all those kids? Can you imagine if we could do that? I don't think we could either. Well, that's what they did, day after day after day. And those kids would be in age from newborn babies clear up to age 18. Well, the next year, Charles Loring Brace. So let's start with the stories. That's the fun part. We have Lester. And I'm going to use the board members because we don't have a big TV with a screen in here. I have a high-tech talk too, but I'll use the low-tech today. Andy, will you help me on this one? Okay. What I'm going to have you do is I'm going to have you go up and down the aisle so everybody can see that board. Okay. The very top picture is Lester. And let the camera see it too. Okay. Lester was a little boy that came from New York City. He rode the train from New York City all the way to Osceola, Nebraska. Now, how these trains worked was they would leave the kids off, and if it was a nice day like today, the kids would get off, and if it was placed by the depot that they could stand outside, they would stand outside, they would line them up. And I don't see many kids in the crowd today, so I'll just show you with myself. They would have them feel their muscles. They would have them take off their hat if they had a hat. They would feel through their hair. What do you think they'd feel through their hair for? Lice, exactly. They would feel their backs. They wanted to be sure they'd be really strong because what would they need them for here in the Midwest? Farming. Help on the farm, right. And they would also have them open their mouth. They would check their teeth. And I had, when you get done, you can just set it by the table there. Thank you. Down here? Yeah, that'd be great. when they had them check their teeth, they would check their teeth because they wanted to be sure their teeth were okay. They didn't want to have to do any dental work when they got them home. This lady that ended up in Broken Bow later, she told me, I felt no different than cattle in a lineup. And to imagine that sticking with you from the time you're a 6-year-old little girl until you're 91 years old. I just can't imagine that. So they would get there and they would be lined up. Now Lester, he was taken from place to place to place to place. Osceola was going to be that last stop. But that last stop, nobody wanted him yet. And so the person in charge, who I'm dressed like, Alice Bogardus, she said, I will find you a place. She said, that's my job. You'll read in some fictional books that they would take them back to New York. However, that's just hype. That's just a way to get you to read the books. And Lester himself told me, Charlotte, you got to get out there, you got to dress up just like they did, but don't hype things up. Tell those people the truth. And so that's why I dress up like this, and my kids say, Mom, you look so dorky. But I'm doing this for Lester. But he said, don't add any hype. So everything you hear out of my mouth is straight out of the mouths of the Orphan Train riders. Now, when she knocked on the door after door after door, she couldn't find anybody. But then she remembered there was this Mrs. West, and Mrs. West lived on a farm. At that farm, her uncle had come on the orphan train, and her dad had come on the orphan train. And perhaps, maybe, they would take an orphan train rider, because this couple didn't have any kids. So she knocked on the door. Her husband was out in the field, but she came to the door and she sat on the front porch. She had that red dress on, and his favorite color was red. She said to him, well, sit down in my lap, little boy. And so he gladly did. She gets to talking to him, and he's quite the talkative little guy. And she says, if you had one wish, what would it be, Lester? And he, in his cutest little 5-year-old voice, says, if I had one wish, Lester, or Mrs. West, it would be to live with a kind lady just like you. Well, he got his wish. The sad thing was, the next year, Miss Bogardus came back, and she checked on those boys. You see, the brother got placed in the farm next door. There were 4 kids in that family. The brother was placed in the farm next door, and he was being abused. The brother was placed there because times were tough, and they just weren't able to place them together at first. But Miss Bogardus, when she realized that he was being abused, she came back and she said, do you think that there's any way you could find it in your heart to take in Lawrence as well? And you know, those Wests, they said, we will do without a meal ourselves, or we'll do without putting shoes on ourselves. Lester has been such a blessing to us that, of course, we'll take Lawrence in. And they were the most phenomenal foster parents I ever saw. When I put the book together, writing about Lester was the easiest one in the world. She had photo albums, and you know, foster parents today do that, but in those days, to have a photo album was absolutely unbelievable. And she had journals. It was just unbelievable. And one of the things she said in the journal really struck my heart. She said, I wish the kids at school would accept the boys. They throw clods at them, and they call them those dumb foster kids. And I just wish they would accept them as normal boys. But Lester inspired our family to become a foster family. And over the couple years that we did it, when I was less busy speaking, we took in 24 kids. It's one of the best things we ever did.